Thank you. Hello, everyone. Real pleasure to be part of this first, I think, important Hungarian Korean dialogue. I'm going to talk about, it's actually, I'm not showing any of the build project. And actually, I'm talking about, no, not this one yet. In the light of this theme about urban regeneration, I'm going to show 5 projects that we're currently working on. They are all through actually public competitions. And some are quite recent, and it's basically our preoccupation for the last 2 years or so. And my title is a new ground. Maybe I can reiterate that as a kind of new normal ground. It's like what used to be very abnormal. That's a kind of a new ground situation that we're dealing with. It's caused by, I think it's sort of a post or late capitalist urban condition like Seoul, where the land price is so expensive, and things get gentrified and kicked out, and everything pushed to suburbia or margins. But then somehow I think it's also all these projects are public projects. So I think we have now is systemic, very important changes in our city and throughout the country. Actually, we have city architects, and they set up a really good agenda, but also the urban lab and so on. They have actually really good sort of research, and then that can turn into actual competition. So actually, all the given the sites are quite weird, and some of the site we don't really. It's like some of the site with a very important ambition, the site doesn't really exist much with a large ambition. And sometimes site itself is so interesting that it will be no architecture sort of imposed on it will be that interesting. So you might as well just highlight the site in a way. And yeah, and we try to build something on the water. It's actually not a ground. And this is the site of the most recent competition last summer. And actually, this picture is the same picture that same area, the ring road that was made late 90s when I was first doing project, sort of student research. I was still outside of Korea. And this was, it was about 70 kilometer long ring road was constructed. Of course, it was just really transformed the city. I mean, and then somehow what came out as a byproduct is this 70 kilometer long, not entirely because some touches the ground, but almost like this Lina Bobardi's MASP in Sao Paulo, that kind of space kind of stretched about 70 kilometers long maybe, to exaggerate. It wasn't planned, but it was actually quite moving when I first saw this condition that it's occupied and sort of appropriated by people at the time when there's no actual serious intention, but mostly about this crash between infrastructures and landscape, which Seoul is very hilly city, by the way, and also architecture and so on. And do I have this image? Actually, it works now. Let's see. So, and then when the given, oh, it's not working, sorry. I'll just skip it, don't worry. Yeah. Maybe the next one. So site is actually one of these elevated road, and then about 15 meters high, and then below is the branch river that kind of goes to this main river that is Han River. And idea was that city, the brief was that because they want to bring this young people to live in the city, very central, quite central location, not to the outside, but they don't really have an available site. So this site was actually reserved for infrastructure, which is the rainwater pump station. It's a kind of a backup plan for when the severe rain happens, maybe once a year. So we have to work with this, not built, but planned infrastructure, and have to build housing for 200 young people with the social programs, activities on top of it. So in a way, these are basically bringing important social ecology to the city. And basically you see this elevated road, and basically what we said was, is actually this video that I couldn't show you was actually like this amazing, I call it a brutalist Arcadian situation that 20 years later there's like fishes this big, with like exotic birds flying around, and then bicycle passage working well. It's really well maintained. So actually the view is great, except the sound is a problem, right? Noise. So basically what we did was the other side is a south facing happened to be, so we put all the rooms on the south, so then you get this sort of almost just chicken coop, but in a kind of nice, kind of curvy, 147 meter long linear volume. And then where it's facing the ring road is actually almost like an atrium-like condition, that where you have things stacked up on top, so that it's actually, you get the noise, you actually get the good view. The dashed line you see in the middle is the elevated road. And then, these are the machines, and then on top is actually vertical garden. This usually has installed 60% of site coverage ratio, but this is special zoning, so we're doing almost more than 80. So there's hardly any ground left, so everything is built on top. So basically, this is a section, the rainwater pump station is about almost 30 meter high, like vertical for water and so on. And then we're building basically gardens and atriums facing it, and then also swimming pools and so on. And we are working with a very good sort of a activist type people. Actually, that was a part of the brief, that we try to kind of bring this sort of ecology of actually we are able to suggest that. So actually we try to we push it as a kind of like Silicon Valley of cooking and chef, because this area is like there's a little nice restaurants popping up. So ground level will have actually the pump. This machine will be, this industrial site will be a kind of a view through, so it's part of actually the identity of this. And then on top some gardens, because we have to have that, because otherwise there will be no outdoor space. So some of these atriums doesn't have a wall, so just a polycarbonate or glass roof. These will be a quite also low budget project. And the next one is in a similar way. It's the same intention, but also it's a city project. And this is not social ecology, but also it's more has to do with the culture, about the filmmaking. You probably heard of Korean cinema, maybe? It's actually, for the last 20 years, has been really kind of exploding. But what's the sad thing that's happening is that the polarization is very severe. So now, this late 90s explosion of this independent cinema, they become super big, famous, like Bong Joon-ho, Park Chan-wook. Parasite, have you seen it? Anyway, I recommend it. It's playing probably somewhere. But basically what happens is more and more become this kind of Marvel comics, theme park, going to a theme park experience that becomes film. And then all this even serious master is really having a hard time producing film. So basically these are the advocates 8 years ago. They supported by Bong Joon-ho, Park Chan-wook, super famous, who become the indie scene, become the masters. And they, cities sort of decide to support this Cinematheque as a city building, which is very noble intention. But the then city architect, Seung Yong-sang, actually, who just left, abandoned us, but he's part of the show. He was the first city architect. He actually had a good insight that instead of, typically you have this 3 cinema complex. Usually you require horizontal organization. And then the city had no money to buy expensive land in the middle, center of the city. So you had to kind of push to this outskirt of the city. So the idea, then his idea was that, he thought it was much more important to have it actually limited site, which is the birthplace of Korean filmmaking since the late 50s. So it's a Chungmuro. But you can buy a small lot, but you can stack up. So this site, you're able to build 50 meters on top. So basically what we proposed was basically 5 sort of solid opaque volumes that are 3 theaters, and then the sort of a studios, and then the other one is the top we added as a bonus open air theater, and then in between the 4 in between spaces. So we call it a montage 425. And film-going cinema used to be an urban experience. Now it's so much has to do with this big shopping mall place with this Muji's and Uniqlo's, and it's like this big shopping mall smelly experience. But basically, what we thought was actually the most social element of cinema is this marquee experience, waiting, anticipation, meeting people. That could be a stacked up sort of a urban experience. So basically, that's how it's going to look like. The ground level is cafe, ticket, and all that, and you can have like a nice premiere, red carpet maybe, and then the above in between is the archive and library, and then the one that is also open, third part is the lecture room, and that will be on top will be the office, but more like a community. So in a way, but I think it's interesting response to this whole urban condition nowadays that our building is at the center. On the right is actually like, this is where we thought our city is going to be, like almost like a Singapore, like really complete high-rise situation. But then after a couple of economic crises, also we know that this is going to stay long, and I think we start to accept that it's a really good thing, actually. So in a way, our building, I think, responds to the tallness and then the smallness of this little old building surrounding it. So from the backside view, this is certain view is going to look like that. Sometimes it looks like a one thing, and then sometimes it looks like a four separate thing, which actually works well also because there are three organizations that are going to be run together, which is one about the classic films. They're using two cinemas, and then one cinema will be purely for Korean independent film, and then the third one is about the educations and so on. So that's sort of what actually we just, within the budget, so soon we're gonna go through the bidding process. This one is also an interesting case about the new ground. The site itself is not that weird, but it's actually public-private collaboration, so that there's a park. It's completely a new territory it's like sort of reclaimed area by the domestic airport. And this is very dense, almost office park-like situation that has these two bands intersecting. And so this is about 80 meter, 90 meter flat ground. And they're sort of a city sort of mutual interest with this private company, Korong, who had a small sort of art foundation for kind of supporting the community arts and so on, not like a superstar arts, but then they contribute this small gallery, and then they're going to donate after 30 years of use. So basically, these are the more or less the recent situation. That basic idea was that instead of, because everything is so rectilinear, that we just propose like some shortcuts, because that's how people tend to walk through. So it creates 4 mounds. 3 of them are actually also, we tend to like mounds because the Seoul is quite, 3D, not flat, but this feels like a Holland almost because it's reclaimed. But the fourth one is kind of also work like a mound. So basically people can climb up. So this part is already finished. It's funny that this building comes later. So it's going to be a sort of a round, sort of a corner. And these, actually there's like in the middle where it's going to be kind of cozy little valley will be almost 27 meter, very shallow arch that would work as a gate, but also it would be like a cloud bridge so that people can climb up and occupy the fourth mound as a public space. And then one of the brief was that we should provide the various heights. So basically the lower part will be quite intimate, 3.3 meter height, and then it rises up to 11 meters so that you get this kind of quite drastic surprise once you walk in. And actually concrete, we're gonna actually, this is an 11 meter concrete mock-up. We're gonna pour like at once, so you don't have this cold joint or every 3 meters, but actually we're working, it's pretty crazy. So this is a picture last week, actually. It's gonna be something like that. Okay, next, do I have time? Yeah. Okay, so this is, you probably have seen it. This is an MBRDB project for Seoul Law. And this was a very noble intention, which I'm very enthusiastically support, because Seoul is, it's not like a Highline. Highline, sometimes it's read as like a bad copy of Highline, but Highline is basically putting cherry on top of already amazing city that is New York, which is already pedestrian friendly, and they're now putting vessels and other things and so on. But this is Seoul is a very challenging place for pedestrian. And I personally never had a car. I'm a walker and bicycle sometimes and so on. And this was 1 kilometer long space that is really challenged, but it also has a historic significance. So this was also city architects' initiative, and basically MBRDB won, and their idea was basically encyclopedia of trees. So from A to Z, I don't know how many, do you know? Like 500 of them. So very educational probably, yeah. And we were invited, and we came in third. So this was our failed scheme, which was completely, I think, opposite, because we kind of, instead of one very, snappy thing, we did 8 different conditions, very complex. Each one is so specific. But then we also added, we kind of expanded our boundary, and because we realized this 1 kilometer long existing infrastructure regeneration, actually it almost touches the much bigger thing, which is a mountain, Namsan Mountain, with the 600 years old fortress. So we didn't win. But somehow 6 years later, earlier this year, they invited us back. because I think they got the idea from us. I don't know, ask the other city architect, but as a consolation prize that this is another stretch that is about 550 meter long. Center is about 27 meter on top, and that touches the Namsan mountain. So basically what we did was very simple. Our running scheme was basically is this kind of situation with the chopped up forest, but basically we're not doing anything architecturally, but basically we are reconstructing the mountain and make the somehow car disappear and city disappear as possible, so that this Namsan mountain is having a presence literally spill down to the valley. So car will be of course leveled differently so that it goes underground. And then this chopped up, I mean, I'll just go very quickly. And you see the history, this 600 years, different technique at different times. And you can see the challenge and totally unnecessary cars here. But this will be like this. And even this part, they didn't know what to do with it because it's chopped up by the road. But then we're just gonna reveal it. So we're gonna also work with the archaeologists and so on. Is it? Okay. So also idea is inside of, I mean, we got the fabulous encyclopedia of trees, so we're gonna just keep the Namsan beautiful, exuberant, maybe less conceptual, just gonna spill down. So we're just very happy to have one less element actually in the city at certain parts. So this is the Solo, and then this will be, although we are half as long, but it's gonna be a lot more soils and so on. Last pair of project that is dealing with the water, Han water. Today I walked around in rain, this melancholic beauty and grandeur of Hungary, of the crossing the river and so on. And I was very jealous actually, because this, and its whole is about, Han River is about 3 times wider, 1 kilometer wide, and 30 bridges now. And of course, it used to be like that. 100 years ago, we used to understand like our city when it was about 200,000 people a century ago. This is a depiction of a Korean master, Kyeomjae Jongsun, who's known for realistic depiction. This is 어디지 여기가? 동작 area. I am old enough to remember we are able to swim in Han River. Of course, it comes with the flooding every monsoon season, and then it quickly become that. And all the riverbank become this vast unaddressed area, and these are the flood zones, and this happens every 1 year. This is another fun video, but maybe if I have time, I'll just show you after. So one of the interesting thing about this controlling the flood, and Han River, basically the whole thing is come from this engineered product that has no orchestra, no conductor. It's like a big orchestra without the conductor, like flood control and the need for car, and then also creating land to develop apartment, basically, mostly the private ones. So what happened was in the late 60s, people were living in this island, Bamsum, as many as 440 people. Earlier this year, this last century was about 1,000 people. They're ship makers. It's like a zomia. You know the word, like uncharted territory, ungoverned territory with, you know, incestual kind of shamanistic, but somehow they were living a good life, freewheeling life, making ship makers. But then this was completely exploded to create, because they needed rubbles to create this modernist, almost Potemkin city, which is the Yeouido next to it. So this was then the military dictatorship, and then the president, and then it exploded. But strangely, this created, but this Bamsum Island grew back because of the sedimentation process, actually 6 times larger than what it was before, and it's still growing. So then it became this one of the most important bird migration site, one and only in urban site, and it's called Ramsar site. And so it became this quite interesting symbol for nature's healing power and resurrection and so on, but which I think is a little bit also dubious, because in a way for me it's almost like a mutant, because sedimentation happened because meanwhile they built the dam on both sides, so it's completely controlled and become like a lake in a way. So it's also the water speed got slow, so it start adding any. So it's kind of like an unintended collaboration between humans and nature in a way. So it's kind of I think it's a good reminder for us to also think about now. The implication is that it's not just nature anymore, but it's this kind of non-human agent is around us, whether it's AI or just some physics or this whole So anyway, so basically the brief was for 2 bird watch programs. So it's a floating deck that we suggested is as a minimum presence as possible. Basically, it's a first time we're doing this kind of pontoon structure that is 9 meters going up and down. So that's going to be looking like that. And then we basically, I think initially they wanted something very showy. Other competitors were like doing like almost mini Bilbao thing. But we're basically, the idea is actually, bird watcher, you know how they are. They're kind of like super nerdy job that they're just spending hours looking at with the binoculars and behind the reeds and so on. So idea is also, we're not allowed to go to this island, but maybe some bird will fly in because we're actually try to see, work with the botanists that some of the seed will flew through it, so it will kind of duplicate in a way. And then what happened was, this is kind of waiting stage, a long story, but last year, actually exactly a year ago, this other open competition announced, which is the using this sort of finished power plant that was built in the early 70s. And power plant, this was the first power plant location. This one is the first one you're looking at. You can see all these ships that Zomia people built here, 1930. And then 1950, you can see this was still kind of romantic site. And then 1970, of course, this connection happened. Of course, the flood control was achieved. And then now Seoul has such a shame situation, unlike Budapest, that you get this vast amount of space, walled by first private views, apartments, completely walled, and then another layer wall, which is a high-speed road. And it's the most idiotic thing. But of course, it's understandable. I mean, we have to grow so fast, of course. So basically, we thought this would be the last chance, I think, to have a view of Han River. But then when I went to see the site, actually I was completely depressed almost, because ground level, you see the Bamsom Island there, and it's blocked by this 4-meter tall flyover. And then when they're giving a site tour, when I went up there, I just realized this is going to be our idea. And I really happy that you made my confirmation that this first has to work with the urban space, because how many this hipster factory turn into something, coffee shops meet something, these things, so many of that. But the idea is that basically, so you get this 18-meter high roof of this 2 turbine hall, will be basically idea is as urban as possible. So you're going to bring up the big elevator for 6-ton cars so that food truck can come in. So then no maybe Starbucks, no big franchise, but this will, and then also people don't have to pay, so that you get this sort of a Pompidou thing in between the boiler and the turbine, but you're going to go directly above. And actually we are reappropriating existing structures to make these people climb up as frequently and as all around possible. And some of these things has been very challenging, because this is 1968 American engineer drawing of this one part, basically is a 2 power station, 50-meter tall, really the kind of sublime machine. And our work has been actually looking around, checking it, all drawings and 3D scanned everything. Still we have to go back and really check the discrepancies and really identify what to be taken down and what to be sort of salvaged. So basically these are the idea. I mean, these are some of the effort. And then the other one will be gutted out. And then the machine will be gutted out, and the space will be used as a black box theater for 600 people. This 50-meter tall space will be art space, some residency, and on top we suggest as just put a roof, and so it becomes like a gigantic pavilion on top, because it has a really beautiful view. So that's some of that. And then furthermore, there's another part that we want together with it, which is the underground parking garage. Basically what we did was we proposed as a new ground that this can be, these 2 turbine hall can be with a vertical lift door, like an aircraft hangar, so that this can be combined and turned into a 130-meter long space. And then also further, the parking garage above will be also another public ground that will add another 120-meter. And then basically we sort of convince, I think, with how this can be actually bigger than Tate Turbine Hall or Arsenale of Venice, almost the lengths, and basically this is that. And basically, I think this pretty much shows this 250-meter long span that could be appropriated in many ways. As also Ugyusung mentioned, we don't know who's going to run it. And then, but I think it's a pretty, but it also I think it's a quite challenging because this space is not meant to be public ground, but we have to go under this elevated road for this floating structure that fluctuates 9 meters, and then we have to go up to almost this three-dimensional imagined ground to be, it's like our substitute tabula rasa in a way. A lot of people mention, I wasn't realize it, but it's like, is this your fun palace? Like, it's fun palace. We didn't design any of that, right? But it kind of looked like it, right? And then we had a biennale, urbanism and architecture. And basically we also gathered, it was a collective city was a theme. So basically we actually literally brought people's posted comments. And we had an ongoing sort of a talks, and Hyungmin, you showing up here. Yeah. So basically this was a diagram. This is a Bamsum, which started 3 years ago. This is Dangini 2 years ago. These are all the entities, public, private, consultative role, and so on. And these are the communications, and we happen to be the, not that, this is like reductively idealized. It's never the round table. We are the hired ones, but somehow we're in the common element. And we try to maybe do some conducting. But I think that's the last image, and there's a video, but I think I went over my time, right? So, okay, thank you for your attention. Thank you.